Today, we're sitting down with Udi Meirav, founder and CEO of Calibre Biometrics. I will be doing a full unboxing and analysis of the revolutionary Calibre device in a future video, but here we just jumped right into discussing the details of the Calibre Breath device, which I hope will be game-changing and, hopefully, a switch away from blood work and other metrics that don't matter for health and wellness toward important metrics that can truly help us improve our health and longevity. I do want to emphasize that I am in no way compensated by the company. All of my comments are independent. I'm just extremely enthusiastic about this technology. Without further ado, let's jump into the podcast. I am super excited about this podcast. I think this device is, you guys have created the right device. So I've been waiting for this for quite a while, and now I get a chance to talk to you about it, about all the details of it. So I'm
And I
pumped.
am delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me. This is a great opportunity for us to tell people more about it. So I'm excited and grateful.
Yeah, fantastic. No, I mean, I remember I saw this device. God, it must have been a long time ago, and put the pre-order in, and then all the hassles of kind of the pre-order process. I can only imagine. I'd love to hear about y'all's side of the story because I can only imagine trying to get this thing out into the wild has been quite a journey.
It's been a journey, and we put it out there for sale probably like 2 years ago, and we thought we were a few months away from being able to ship, and we thought it'd be a good idea to give people a heads up. And it turned out to take longer.
Sure.
Guess what? Never happened before in my life, but something took longer than you expected. So,
Yeah,
but but I
yeah.
think, but I
One of
think
my
we're
favorite.
there. And by the way, it's not that we're
Yeah,
done. I mean, this is going to be a long journey, and the product now is in pretty good shape. But I can see
sure.
many things we would do different and better as time goes on. We will do that and implement all these
Of
additional
course.
improvements that we have already kind of in store.
Of course, yeah, and I think at one point you guys had posted about how the supply chain had been interrupted with COVID, and getting the sensors was a bit of a challenge. They're German, is that right?
We have German sensors, we have Swiss sensors, we have some American sensors, and
Okay.
and the supply chain disruptions were a big part of the story. And other, vicissitudes of life in a startup company.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
software bugs, all those things, they happen. And it has slowed us down a little bit, but I think in the end, we have a great product now, and other people are beginning to see that and to say that. So we're super excited.
Yeah, no, I mean, I will say, you made me nervous there a little while. I was like, I kept checking, like, are these guys still in business? Like, is there any like dissolution of the company? Like, what's going on? But then when it came through, I was super pleased and just like excited to see it. And then, of course, as excited as I was, I got caught up with my own stuff, and it sat on my shelf for 4 months. And so,
That's right.
finally broke it out and started playing around with it. I must admit, I mean, and for you, just tell me if I'm asking like for secret sauce here or whatever. But I don't think I understand how the flow sensor works. Like I
Yeah.
like how did you get flow out of this? Like it it has holes in it. How do you have a flow sensor if there's holes? Like
Yeah.
I
We,
don't
we
get
use
it.
magic. That's the trick.
What is it?
We use magic.
M- Magic. Yes. Okay. That would make more sense than anything
Yeah.
I've come up with.
No,
Yes.
it's actually
Yeah.
simple, and I'm happy to explain it. And it's not even a secret because we have a patent on it, and as anybody can go
Yeah.
read the
Great.
patent, so it's not a big secret. But let me explain how it works because it's really cool, and
Yeah.
I think it also not only is it cool and it's nice to understand it, it also will give you some insight into how you could use it for other things. For example, it has a certain range of breath. If you breathe more than about, I don't know, 150, 180 liters per minute, which is a very high breathing rate that only serious
Yep.
athletes can ever get to. But nevertheless, if you pass that level, you'll max out. You'll max out the range of the sensors, and it won't be able to read anymore after that. So, oh, well, that's too bad if I'm an athlete that wants to have 200 liters. But then,
Yeah.
and you will see this in a second, once you understand how it works, you see, well, no, it's not a problem. If you want to get to 200 or 300 liters a minute, minor modifications of this product, you'd have to modify it, but minor modifications would allow you to get to much higher breathing rate.
Okay.
There would be a compromise on the lower end. You'd have a slightly less sensitivity at the very low breathing rate or volumes, but it's completely possible from a technical standpoint. It's actually fairly straightforward. So let me explain how
Okay.
this does that flow
Yeah.
sense. So you got basically a mask that, you put on your face and you breathe. And when you breathe, all the air that's coming out, whether it's from your mouth or your nose, if you wear it properly, both nose and mouth, you can see the inside here. The air from the nose
Yep.
goes here, and then from the mouth goes here. But they all eventually have to come out through these holes. And let me put it next to the camera here. The camera's not that great, but
Yep.
so all the air that you exhale and inhale basically comes through these holes. So
Yep.
that's fine. Okay, but there's nothing in the way, right? There's no sensors there to measure what's going on, right? But
Right.
here's the thing. The air flows through these holes because there's a slightly difference in pressure, the air pressure between the inside and the outside. When you're exhaling, there's a slightly higher
Mm-hmm.
pressure inside than out, which is why air wants to go out. And when you're
Mm-hmm.
inhaling, it's the opposite. There's a lower pressure on the inside, and that's why air rushes in. And of course, that pressure is generated by the muscles of your lungs. But the
Sure.
point is that how we measure it is we simply measure the pressure inside the mask and compare it to the pressure outside. And we have been able to map very accurately the relationship between what is that pressure difference and how much air is flowing at that instant based on that pressure difference. So by measuring that pressure, which is all we need to do, we have a very accurate real-time measurement of the exact amount of air that's flowing in that millisecond. And I say millisecond because these sensors are pretty amazing. We don't make them. We just buy them from sensor companies, right? But they can measure that pressure 1,000 times per second. Okay. So you need a millisecond. So it has that kind of time resolution,
Yep.
and it can measure flow rates that range, over a range of 100,000 fold. So it's a
Wow.
wide range of flow rates, very high time resolution. These are amazing sensors. And because they're available is one of the reasons we set out to do this. In my background,
Mm.
I was a sensor guy more than a breath guy. And I knew a lot
Oh,
of
okay.
going on in the sensing world. I said, based on the availability and the price points today of these differential pressure
Yeah.
sensors, I can make a device that's going to measure breath flow with phenomenal accuracy, and it's going to be super small and run by a battery, and it'll be really cool. So,
Wow.
so hopefully
Well,
that
you have.
answers your question.
It does. No. So I guess so. A little bit of a follow up question: how much perfection in mouth nose seal is required for accuracy? Because I'm coming from, with previous devices, I got to strap that thing on like it's, suffocating me, especially with a beard. I got to,
Yeah,
sometimes I have to wax my beard just to make sure that, it seals. And
right,
this
right.
doesn't seem to have that level of, I could be wrong, but
No, you are right, and the answer, it's a little flippant. The answer is a little flippant, but I would say it's a lot less than you think. Okay, because we see a lot of
yeah,
people who get this device and they want to strap it on real tight, and
yeah.
every single time we have that conversation, we say it does not need to be tight, and I can
Not
explain a
only
little bit why, because it's nice to understand. If you look at the way
and
this is made,
And
there's
not
this
only
one.
that, just to jump in for a second, like my experience with just looking at the data was I initially did strap it on tight. And then when I loosened it, the data got better and better up to a certain, it actually seemed to have better readings as I wore it looser. And it's very unfamiliar in that sense.
No, that's exactly right, what you said now. And it's important, which is why we always tell people don't put it on tight. First of all, it's not comfortable, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good
Yeah.
reason.
No,
But
exactly.
actually, if you make it tight, you're squeezing the mask against your face more closely.
Mm-hmm.
So there's less distance, and you're messing up with the airflow patterns, which could actually cause
Mm,
distortions of the pressure readings. So it's designed to work perfectly when it's just touching your face and not pressing against it. When you press it, it gets
mm,
closer to your face. And it's not that it couldn't work, but it's calibrated to work accurately when it's not squeezed against your face.
okay.
So the other thing is that, and this is, I think, the part that is my favorite. There's this really soft rubber around these things. Okay, and then there's this
Yep.
hard plastic, which you got yourself. Okay, good. When you exhale air, it kind of inflates the plastic, a little bit like a balloon, right? It inflates it,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that it's designed is when it inflates because of you're exhaling air into the mask. It
Mm-hmm.
actually tends to fit more tightly against your face, not in a way that squeezes against your face, but it
Sure.
blows up a little bit more. So
Seals a little bit. Yeah.
improves the seal. So the seal naturally gets better as you exhale more air. And it measures only during the exhale. The exhale air is the only air that we actually try to measure here. So naturally, it seals well without much, without pulling hard and without trying very hard, frankly. The only thing you got to remember, and this is really important because sometimes it's not intuitive, is to not get your nose into this hole here. Your nose is supposed to sit on top here like this, as opposed to stick it into the hole like that. That's not what you need to do. And again, it's a question of very light touch.
So not like this. Go ahead. So so that's an important.
Yes. So basically think about it as your nose rests on top of this thing and does not sink into the bottom. So like this. See, that's all you need to do, really. You could dip it into the hole here. And then you basically are only making it work less comfortable and you're not improving anything. So that's all you need. We see people do that. We now have a new design, which we will implement in the future, which doesn't let the nose fall into that hole. It won't change anything in the performance, but it'll just prevent people from unknowingly or accidentally getting their nose into this. Not that anything bad happens. It's just not necessary.
Yeah. No. Okay.
But the point is that, so the air from the nose to the mouth flows in, it inflates the rubber a little bit and it actually seals better against your face. So the sealing happens naturally. And let's say there's a little bit of leak, let's say there's a 5% leak in the air. Well, all that's going to happen is that everything is still going to be pretty accurate, just 5% less. You get 5% less air measured. It's not perfect, but honestly, those kinds of errors in the world of breath measurement, and I'm sure we'll talk more about breath measurement today. In that world, those are not considered large error, because breath is hard to measure with like 1% accuracy. So the kind of leakages that we normally see here are not significant. And it's great because making it tight would have made it bigger, less comfortable, and harder to put on. This is very easy to put on. And one of the reasons it's so easy to put on is because we don't need to have multiple straps on the bottom and the top and all that. You could do that, but you don't need to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the other, and it's important you said that actually, is that, okay, even if your nose goes in or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's sort of like, okay, it's not necessary, but
it's very forgiving.
Yes, the forgivingness makes a big difference, right? Especially for a device, if you're going to be trying to wear it, especially working out, moving X, Y, and Z, even just knowing that it's a forgiving device means that I don't have to mess with it. If I feel like whatever, it's like, fine, I just work out, right? Like
exactly.
I just know
if it's loose so that you can actually get
forgivingness to it.
If there's a gap between your roof and your nose like this, you'd be surprised. It's not perfect, but it's actually pretty good. It won't throw it off completely.
Oh, wow. Really?
Because,
that's pretty impressive. Okay.
The air has to come out and it's generating about the same pressure. And so it turns out to make less of a difference than you might have expected. We've been on this learning journey as well. We didn't know when we first made this how accurate it would be and how important the seal would be. I don't think we're done. I think as over the coming years, we'll get better at this game of comfort slash, tightness slash accuracy. But it's surprisingly insensitive to that at this point, which is kind of cool. But the one thing I will also tell you is that if you know how it works, you can also throw it off. For example, if you want to make it read wrong, let's say you blow out all the air from the side of your mouth like this, from one side, you won't confuse it and it will give you wrong readings because it's not designed to be foolproof. It's just designed to work well in normal, don't try too hard type mode.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's good to know. So I'm curious what the modification would be for very high athletic volumes.
Oh, that's very simple. Just drill some more holes in it.
So okay.
There's a bunch of holes here. And if you have, and now these holes are, so let's talk about what happens if you had more than this. What happens if you have less? Okay. What's the trade-off? And it's not just the number, it's where they are. And we work really hard on where to put them so that we get relatively accurate, consistent readings. And so I don't want to trivialize that decision process or that development process, but having this general idea in mind. If you make the holes bigger, then you would get less resistance to airflow, which means two
Mm-hmm.
things. It'll be easier to exhale through it at very
Mm-hmm.
high volume, and you would get less pressure reading. So if, let's say your pressure sensor has a certain range from here to here. If you breathe really
Mm-hmm.
hard, at some point you can exceed the upper range and it will no longer be able
Yep.
to read that. But if you make more holes, it'll take a lot more air to get to that. So you could breathe
Yep.
not 180 liters a minute, you could breathe 300 liters a minute and still
Yep.
not exceed the range of the sensor.
The
Fantastic. So that's what happens if
right.
you have more holes. But, and what happens then also is you have less pressure developed at all levels of breathing. So now if you're just sitting at your desk like we are now and breathing very calmly, a couple of liters, maybe 5, 6 liters a minute, you're generating relatively little pressure. You basically can't feel the pressure. If you just sit at your
Mm-hmm.
desk and breathe, you cannot measure any resistance. You might feel the thing on your face, but it's zero resistance to airflow. Even
Yep.
honestly, even running kind of at a moderate rate on a treadmill, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't produce resistance.
Yep.
But therein lies the rub, because at some point, if you have too many holes and you're not exerting yourself, the airflow is not enough to get to the threshold of
Threshold. Yep.
sensitivity of that pressure sensor. At
I
which
see.
point you will not be able to accurately measure your very low breathing rates. Like I said again, of sitting at your desk. Now with this you can, because it was designed specifically to measure very well breathing at like sitting now, like we are and chatting. But
Yep.
if you expand these holes significantly, the signal at this very low breathing rate could drop so low that the sensor would start, having trouble picking it up.
S- So along those lines, though, I mean, does it require recalibration or does it require anything? You can just like drill holes and it pretty much
Oh no,
figures it out.
I'm not saying do this at home. No, no, this is a very accurate thing. It has to be very
Okay.
precisely
Yeah. Yeah.
engineered.
Yeah.
And then we have to rewrite
I see.
the software, we call the firmware, which is the resident software here, which
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
it
That makes
translates
sense.
pressure into flow. And that has to be redone from scratch.
Into flow.
So it's not like just drill a
Correct.
few holes.
So
Colloquially, I say, all we need to do is drill some holes. What I mean is we develop a new
okay,
version of
sure.
this and test the hell
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
of it
Yeah.
until we know exactly what the relationship between flow and pressure is. And then we can release it to customers.
But so you guys could obviously in the future basically release sort of the high volume mask, right? And have an alternate, whatever. If it's in the high volume mask, then you use this version of the software, or if it's in the regular
Exactly.
mask, you use this volume. And you could even have an athlete that switches between masks in that sense.
What you just said now is brilliant, because that's exactly what we plan to do. We're not there yet, but the beauty is that all the measurement is done electronically by this module, which is separates from the mask, right?
Yep.
You will not have to redo this. This will be the exact same object, and you can have
Yep.
two or more versions of this. One of them you use when you're, at your desk or just taking a stroll or even asleep in your bed. The other is the one you take for your VO2 max tests or for
Yep.
really high exertion where you want to breathe more. And that's when, again, same module. This is where all the smarts are, but this piece of plastic, you know, you have a different one, which is designed very accurately
Of
for
course.
the
Yep.
higher
Has to
exertion.
be. Okay.
Exactly. And so there
Very
could be
cool.
many of these in different shapes, sizes, and colors, all these things all work with the
Sure.
same fundamental unit. And this is where the whole brain is, or where the sensors
Yeah.
are.
Totally.
And this thing is so light, it weighs 20 grams. That's less than an ounce. And it's all
Yeah.
inside this thing. Yeah. It's
It's
pretty
pretty
cool.
incredible, and yeah, absolutely, and so that's maybe a good jumping off point here. But actually, I take that back. Let's for maybe parts of the audience that we kind of jumped in here because I'm geeking out on it, and it's just cool. But maybe we take a step back here and and go through metabolic and breath measurement and the whole point of it. I mean, so that just for people who are unfamiliar, it's like, look, at the end of the day, your body takes in oxygen, goes through chemical reactions, produces carbon dioxide, and you exhale that carbon dioxide. And the
Right.
amount of oxygen you can consume is the subtraction from what's in the air to what's coming out when you exhale. And the amount of carbon dioxide is a trivial amount in the air, and the amount that you exhale in carbon dioxide, and measuring that, the oxygen consumed and the carbon dioxide produced, is pretty much a total body picture of your metabolism, right?
That is exactly right. I like to say that your breath is a ledger of your metabolism. And we basically
Mm.
measure breath, and that tells you what's going on. And it's quasi real time. I mean, it's almost, we can talk more about what is it exactly real time or almost real time, but it's virtually real time ledger of your energy metabolism in your body for the exact reason that you said. Because all the energy that our body produces ultimately comes from bringing in oxygen and using it to break down a fuel like fats or sugars. And the byproducts of that breakdown are essentially water and CO2. Water goes back to your body. The CO2 leaves in breath.
And I guess the curious thing for me is, or interesting thing, the reason I'm excited about this, people don't understand. I think a lot of the times they see, oh well, my smartwatch, my Apple smartwatch tracks calories, right? It's like, no, it's using heart rate as a weird sort of proxy for caloric consumption. And it's not absurd. I mean, sure, your heart beats faster when you're burning more calories. There's some vague logic to it. But it's not even really a measurement. It's a proxy measurement.
That's exactly right. And, I think those devices are wonderful because anybody can get one and it gives you a general sense. Now, I will say they work particularly well in a very repetitive exercise mode. So for example, if you're getting on a treadmill or even better on a stationary bike, then, and you know, the body weight and all that stuff, then you can come up with a formula that translates the mechanical motion into energy consumption. And that's
Sure.
not bad, and now you don't get a lot of insight. It just tells you, okay, you work for 40 minutes at this speed. Okay. And you can feel good about how many calories you're burning. It doesn't tell you if your calorie burn is changing because of your conditioning, because of your nutrition, because of the weather. There's a lot of really interesting insights that are potentially available, but you
Yep.
are not able to get them, from that because they're not designed to pick up on those things. So,
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting thing. I in particular, for instance, I've always been curious to explore this, but I have a remarkably, or not remarkably, but somewhat inefficient run mechanically because I row a lot better than would be expected for my running ability, and so yeah, if I'm on a treadmill, the treadmill may think I'm burning a certain number of calories, but it's not going to be exactly right because my mechanics aren't that good.
and that there have been some studies that compare what is the accuracy of treadmills and other type of mechanical exercise devices to true calorie burn and to each other. And, they're not terrible, but they're not very good either. And it gets even more interesting and more tricky when you look into, well, I want to measure my calorie burn in different situations. What if you're going out for a stroll, or sitting at your
Hmm.
desk or working at a gym, where you're doing various things, over time, then it quickly deteriorates your ability to get meaningful reads on your calorie burn go down very quickly you don't have that repetitive motion. So,
Yep.
so your point well taken, and it gets even worse when you're not having a repetitive motion to measure that. And now people have known this for a long time. I mean, measuring calorie burn by measuring breath, that's not a new idea. That we have not come up with that.
No, yeah,
Uh, the people who invented that are no longer alive. This has been for more than
yeah,
a century, a known technique.
yep,
The interesting thing is that it's never been a technique that people have been able to bring to the masses, if you will, or to make it so easy
yes,
that anybody can just do that. And it's
yes,
an interesting, perspective here that everything gets smaller and fancier technologically, computers, cell phones, and these skin sensors that you wear on your wrists or other places. And somehow breath got left out of this party. Nobody had come up with a
yeah,
way to miniaturize and make easy and efficient and accessible breath measurement until now. And the reason for that is because ultimately you're dealing with the flow of air, and flow of air does not get miniaturized. So as long as your paradigm
mhm,
is that the way to measure airflow is to get in front of it and to channel it into a tube and then measure the
Mm-hmm.
flow in the tube, then you basically constrain yourself to breathing through a tube in order to measure your
Yeah, yeah.
breath. And the tube has to go somewhere. And you need sensors and a backpack that go with that or on a station. So
Yep.
you needed to change the whole paradigm of how to measure flow before you can start thinking about making breath measurement something that you can just take anywhere and do it easily and doesn't require big, heavy equipment.
I guess the other thing I struggle with, because I VO2 max measurement is an integral part of my practice, and metabolic measurement. That's a big part of what I do with patients, as part of the, because if you had to pick a single metric to measure someone's cardiac risk, it's VO2 max, right? And I would rather not rely on a single metric, but if you had to pick just one, that's the one, right?
Yeah,
And
and that's a very interesting statement, by the way. And I don't know if everybody understands that, but there is this limit as terms of how much oxygen your body can absorb, and you can breathe harder and harder. You can make your lungs cut a lot of air, but you may not be getting more oxygen. There's this limit that your body runs into, and that's the
yep,
VO2 max. And
and
it's a very important indicator of how good your body is at just running itself.
yeah, and that's not my statement. That's the American Heart Association, c- you know, consensus paper on cardiopulmonary exercise testing, right? Like CPET testing, they said, hey, look, this VO2 max is the single best metric we have. And no one in medicine does it. No one. Like, we test cholesterol, terrible predictor. We test blood pressure, there's some prediction, but we test all these things rather than the thing that matters. And then the struggle I run into with patients is they never heard of it. And they're like, "Well, why are you spending so much effort trying to optimize my this thing I've never heard of? Why don't we work on my cholesterol?" And I'm like, "I'm if this is good, I don't care that much about your cholesterol. A little bit, but not that much."
Yeah. And it's, the only people, well, maybe not the only, but most people who know about VO2 max are actually athletes because athletes hear
Yeah,
this from their coaches. But athletes
sure.
who do this, they hate it too. They don't like doing VO2 max. It's a
It's an
tedious,
awful test.
yeah, it is.
It's
You said
it's
it.
a
That's
very
right.
painful, yeah, it's a very painful test. I avoid it as much as possible, but once a year you can at least do for even a casual person, you can put yourself through a once a year test. Um,
But we think that by having a tool like this that anybody can use anytime, you can, first of all, you could do VO2 max on your own, any day of the
yep,
week if you feel like it. That's one thing you could do. But maybe you can also do some simpler breath measurement, which don't actually technically qualify as a VO2 max, but give you something which is relevant, not to say equivalent, to
yep.
VO2
No,
max.
sure.
And
Well,
we think that
and I
there's a
think
whole world there of things that can only now
yes,
begin to be explored because you give, okay, here's your tool.
absolutely.
We don't know what the value necessarily is going to be for every single person, but people can start playing with it now and come up with great ideas. And we're already seeing that. We're already seeing to
I,
come back. They can do a 6-minute test, a 10-minute test, a 20-minute test, and you might be able yourself to develop some new protocol that you like best and
I'll
doesn't
say
overly burden your clients or your patients, and
totally.
find out that that's almost as good as a VO2 max, but takes only quarter of the time.
Sure. I
So,
think the other there's so many areas of interest. I think there's interest in oxidative capacity, your fat max, right? And to what degree does that reflect total cellular health, metabolic health, and to what degree is that predictive of longevity? No one's ever done that study. Like, we can say VO2 max because somebody studied it, right?
right,
But we didn't
right.
have the data. So how, maybe this is more important than VO2. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not important at all. But it seems to, predict diabetes to some degree and whatever. But I've never seen longevity data the way I have with VO2 max. So having this device out there and say, okay, well, now we can start to see what are the factors that go into longevity, cardiac events, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you might want to say a few words to your listeners about how breath measurement can tell you your fat burn, because I think that plays into a lot of these
That's
issues.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because when I have patients come in, I try to talk about it a little bit, and then I'm like, look, let's just do the test, and you'll see when you see your data, then we'll go through. But yeah, and you correct me. I mean, this is your field, but my understanding is that basically on a biochemical level, when you are burning carbs, the amount of carbon dioxide produced is in a 1-to-1 ratio with the amount of oxygen consumed. If you're burning pure sugar, if you're burning
Right.
fat, that ratio is 0.7. And
Correct.
so anywhere in between zero point 0.7 and 1, you're burning a mix of fuels. And the particular mixture of fuels that you burn is based on your body's ability to do those reactions fast enough to produce the ATP you need, the energy you need for whatever activity you're asking of it. And
Yeah. So
so the speed of the reaction, the total available substrate, that's another thing is that, every one of us has more than enough fat to walk slowly for a nearly indefinite period of time, right? But I don't have that much sugar or that much creatine to where if I go at an all out sprint, people don't think about that. Why do you have to stop sprinting? Or why do you have to slow down? Like, if you just go at an all out sprint from a get go, why can't you just keep going the way you can walking? Right? We all accept that. We all know that. But the reason is you run out of the fast burning fuel of creatine and then anaerobic uh, glycolysis. And fat burn is just not fast enough as a biochemical reaction to produce that energy, that ATP.
so there's several mechanisms that come into play when what you describe, and I am certainly not an expert in this, right? We're the techno guys. We make devices
Fair
to
enough.
measure. We can
Sure,
stand
fair enough.
behind that, but the human body is way too complicated for my brain. But it is true that we have two different fuel sources, and there are others, by the way. We can also burn alcohol, and we can burn proteins, but
Sure.
mostly it's about fat and sugar, right? And if you just look at the basic chemistry of the fat molecule, the sugar molecule, when it breaks down, the fat molecule produces less CO2 for the amount of oxygen that it consumed relative to the sugar molecule. So the big idea here is if you keep track of your CO2 exhalation and your net oxygen consumption, the ratio between these two gives you that insight. And
Yep.
it's true, by the way. It's theoretically true, but there's some complexities here that people need to be aware of. It is, I think it is exactly true that in the long run, over the course of time, the balance of CO2 and oxygen tells you the full story about your oxygen and about your fat and carb burn, as
Okay.
long as you can separately account for protein burn. In most cases, protein burn is a very small part of people's energy source. Proteins are used to build body tissue, but not so much as a fuel. So that's okay. But if you have a person who's using a lot of protein as a fuel source for energy, then the math gets different, and sometimes things are not exactly the same as they are in this more simplified but very common description of its fat versus carb. So if you have the ratio of carbon dioxide and oxygen with very high precision, you will be able to tell what is your consumption, sugars versus fat in generating energy. Now, what you said earlier is a separate and very interesting thing, which is your body also has a mechanism of producing energy without oxygen. It
Hmm.
can do it for a very long time, but it can do it. And when you do that, and that's what's called anaerobic exercise or anaerobic effort.
Hmm.
And people think of anaerobic as something which is, high exertion, for a short burst of time. It doesn't have to be high exertion. It could be just, quickly, just I jump up now and pick up something, come back, and don't even breathe. I don't take a single
Yeah.
breath. I can go get something, and bring it back to my desk. That was anaerobic in a technical sense. And we have that energy source in our body. Eventually, we're going to have to replenish it. So we will always have
Yep.
to eventually bring back oxygen to make up for the use of this anaerobic fuel that we have in our body. But for a short period of time, we can use it and we produce a lot of CO2 without commensurate oxygen consumption. That's when you
Hmm.
get high ratio of CO2 to oxygen, which can be even more than one. And when you're burning sugar, which you can do for a very long time until you run out of sugar, you would have
Yep.
a 1-to-1 ratio of oxygen and CO2. But
Yep.
for a short period of time, you can just run on ATP and, or, processes that basically do not need oxygen, at least not a lot of it. And,
Yep.
and until those run out, you could be out there producing CO2 and not using one. So that's a
Yep.
possibility.
Yep.
And those mix in because when you exercise, number of things happen in parallel. One of them is your body starts leaning in more on sugar than on fat, because fat takes a lot of oxygen to burn down. Sugar needs a little bit less. So we lean in on the sugar. It's easier, it's faster, great. In addition, we also consume this non-aerobic energy source. And both these things point in the same direction of more CO2 relative to oxygen. So the ratio of CO2 to oxygen goes up as you exercise, especially as you exercise very intensively. Right? When you relax, you tend to go back into more fat burn, which is the preferred mode. So if you want to burn fat,
Sure.
you don't want to work out too hard. You're just pushing your body into sugar consumption. Get into a steady state, effort that really burns fat efficiently. And if you go harder, you'll actually burn less fat than more sugar.
It's an interesting thing, right? But if you go harder during the exercise, and again, this device opens up the opportunity to start measuring these things. If you go very hard during the session, you're burning mostly sugar at that time, but afterward, you may end up burning more fat to replenish your stores, right? And
Yes.
so the but with that said, the other interesting thing from a metabolic health perspective is if you do the steady state cardio, less than 50-50 mixed, which is kind of the zone 2 training, over time your maximum fat burn rate can go up. So a very highly trained individual can have, you know, 10 calories per minute of just fat burn. I don't have that. Mine probably around 5 or 6, and so but you can actually increase the point, you can push back the point at which your body switches to sugar just because it's gotten so efficient at burning fat because you've done that steady state cardio over time.
These things to me are fascinating. And like I said, again, we're not experts, and I'm not, and no one in my company is an expert in these things. But I do think it it begins to tell the story of how rich the data is in your breath, and
Absolutely.
and what all the different things that you could do if you had access to the data, if you had a tool to measure it. And that's where we come in and say, okay, here's a tool and let's get going. And
Yep.
and we want to make it better over time. So tell us what you want to see in this tool that we don't yet have. And most importantly, tell us how you want to use it, in how it could be helpful as a trainer, as a physician, as just an individual who wants that data because it helps them paint a more complete picture of their health and their wellness.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into that probably in depth here, but I did want to say that one of the uses one of the things I was excited about even before I opened the box, when people try to lose weight, when we restrict calories, one of the obstacles to restricting calories is that we reduce our fidgeting, just our sort of it's neat is the term non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So we tend to just, when we're at the computer, instead of moving and gesturing, we tend to do a little bit less because we're restricted in calories. So then you don't lose the weight because you have also reduced your activity level, right? Now, what the device opens up the possibility, I think, of saying, okay, before I restrict calories, let me wear this during 1 or 2 or 3 work days. Just see when I'm at the computer, how many calories do I burn on average per minute, right?
Right.
Then if I start restricting calories, I can start to say, if I start wearing it, I can start to say, oh, well, actually, yeah, I see myself just unconsciously burning fewer calories, right? That then have to either be made up with exercise, or, and here's another interesting possibility, there we could come up with a device that just fidgets for you, like a TENS unit, and just sort of like triggers certain muscle activations to bring your unconscious activity back up to where it was, right? So all
Right.
these ideas are possible once you have something that measures what's happening, because otherwise you're
Exactly.
just sort of floating
Like
in the void.
if you have something that externally stimulates your muscles, which is essentially what you're
Mhm.
describing. Okay, how well does that contribute to your calorie burn? Well,
Exactly right.
your wrist device won't tell you that, but your breath will.
Yep.
And now that you have a device that can do that, well, that's cool. I don't know the answer to the question,
Yeah.
but I know that we have a
But
tool now
that's
that might begin to help.
exactly.
It
We
might
can now
help begin
find out,
answering that
right?
question. You know,
Yep.
so
Yep.
that's exciting. The thing I wanted to point out about this fat and carb burn, though, just to set realistic expectations, the difference in the amount of carbon dioxide produced between pure fat on the one end and pure carbon on the other end is not huge. Okay. It's measurable, but it's not huge. And it's important to understand that, because what it means is, because instruments, including ours, have finite accuracy and finite resolution, there is there's a little uncertainty about everything you measure. And because the whole difference between 100% fat and 100% sugar is not a huge change in CO2 levels, even small errors in your CO2 measurement can generate fairly significant errors, if you will, in your fat carb burn ratio. So it's good to keep that in mind. It's still fun to look at
Yeah.
this, but it's also important to keep in mind that the accuracy is not perfect. And always keep in mind that that's something that might explain some things that you see that may not make sense.
And I think that's point well taken, though that leads us directly into this study, I think, now that we're talking about accuracy.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
by the way, that statement was not a statement about our product. It was a statement about
no,
human
no,
breath.
in general, of
And
course, about the
anybody measuring
notion of breath
have
work.
that same issue, of course.
Totally, totally. Um, but I will say, my mental model before I read the study, before I interacted with the device, is that with anything, okay, there's the Whoop band and there's the Apple Watch and all this. None of that's as accurate as an EKG, right? You pay a price for the miniaturization, right? And it would still be valuable data even if it were off by a significant amount, because you have the opportunity to gather so much of it, right?
Right.
And that's part of the value of these heart rate trackers as well. If I can track your heart rate for 24 hours, or a continuous glucose monitor, right? Those are not really as accurate as like a venous sample of your glucose sent to the lab, but you can get 24 hours of data. And even if there's a little bit of fudge factor, the trend provides a lot of information, right? So that
Right.
was kind of my mental model is, okay, I kind of expect a bit of trade-off in accuracy for the sake of miniaturization and availability. Now, this study indicates far the opposite. Your device kind of came out on top in accuracy as well.
So it did show very well. That is true. And we want to be modest and humble about it for two reasons. First of all, because it's always better to be humble, but also because I would hesitate to guarantee that that level of accuracy that was legitimately observed by objective scientists, that will always reproduce itself. When you give a device to people who, and they take it to their gym or their home, and they use it in different ways, I think there is all kinds of ways that things may not be quite as nice as they are in because our device was measured objectively in a lab environment by experts. And they put it through the exact same test as they did all the other devices. And for the listeners who may not be familiar with this was a study done a few months ago in a university laboratory in the Netherlands. And they essentially took most, if not all, of the breath measurement instruments that are available in the marketplace today. These are mostly medical devices that are quite expensive. They're out of reach for not consumer product. And they're typically also very large objects. You wheel them in on a cart, right? You don't put them on your
Hmm.
face like this. And I think also importantly, they they require an expert operator, which I think is an
Yes.
important, not often highlighted, but I think it's very important. You need someone to run it, operate it for you while you strap on the mask and the tubes and get on the treadmill. The
Hmm.
Calibre does not require that at all. You just take yourself to the gym, you put it on your face and get on the treadmill and you look for the data on your iPhone, and that's it. You don't need
Yeah.
help from it. Having said all that, so they put all these, and when they started this study, They didn't even have the Caliber. It was before the Caliber was, public available, but they reached out to us. Well, we can give you an early release product of this. You can compare it to the other ones if you really want to. And we said, look, it's not designed to compete with those things. It's a different idea. It may not be as good as some of those, but that's okay because we're trying exactly what you said. We want to make it available to people, even if the
Hmm.
accuracy is compromised. But the ease of use and the ubiquity uh, have a lot of value to a lot of people. That was the idea behind this. And so when they did the test, they actually found that the accuracy of our device was actually quite high, and it was among the best of all those 14 or 15 products that they
Yeah,
looked at.
you're okay. I appreciate the value of being modest, but really, it showed really, really well. I mean, we'll actually we'll put up on the screen the I'll just screenshot the study, okay, and
Yep.
we'll put it up, and people can see how this is comparing. And I'll tell you, by the way, so I actually saw this study before you sent it to me. I saw the headline and I didn't open the study. I didn't read it because the headline had read something like, mechanical breath device or something. And I was like, yeah, yeah, but it's not real world. I don't care that much. Right. And
Okay.
so then when you sent me the study, I was like, okay, well, let me take a look. Like, opened it up and it had that mechanical, they created, it sounded like a mannequin face, basically, like breathing into these, some sort of the
So
controlled
maybe
breath.
I take a minute to explain
Yeah,
what they did
please.
because they really did two separate things. For
Yep.
because it's always setback. The problem with measuring accuracy of a breath measurement device. Okay, you put on a person, it gives you an answer. You don't know true north because you don't know what
Yeah.
that person was breathing. So what do you compare the reading to tell you if it's accurate?
Yep.
And and nobody's actually addressed that in a satisfactory way until this study. All they would ever
Yes.
do is, well, this either makes sense or it compares to some other device, which we believe is
Yep.
pretty good, and see how they compare to each other. And that has been the state of the art for decades. What they did is they took a mechanical breath simulator. Okay, this is basically a box that produces breath, which is designed to simulate human breath, but you know exactly how much air is flowing and how much
Yep.
oxygen is in it and how much CO2, because it's all produced through instruments and it's
Yep.
producing these breaths, and you can control different breath rates and different breath volumes and different oxygen levels. And let's create a protocol, which is essentially a few minutes with this setting and then a few more minutes with that setting, and see how close each device comes to true north. True north is what the mechanical simulator is known to produce.
Yes.
So that was part one of the study. The other part of the study was they said, well, just to make sure that there's nothing different, fundamentally
Yes.
different about human wearing it than, we can talk about why there would be, but
Hmm.
a human versus a machine, let's also put it on a few human subjects.
Yes.
And for the human subjects, what they did is it's really compared one to the other, the devices one to the other,
Correct.
but it was a very tightly controlled human experience. So the guy gets on a stationary bike, he pedals at a very accurate rate for, a couple of minutes. And only then we start collecting the data for a few more minutes. And then we go to a different, cycling rate. And they recreated that exact same protocol for all 15 devices for two athletes. Just a lot of data had to be collected. They even did the following, which is they changed the order, of doing this exercise versus that exercise with different athletes, just to make sure that the order doesn't even matter.
Correct.
So, so they had the human element as well as the mechanical element, and they combined both for a more holistic picture, if you will, about the accuracy of these devices. So that was kind of my
Absolutely.
and my
Yeah.
explanation
No, thanks. No,
what they did in that study.
and that's a great overview. And that's kind of, I always come down on the medical side. I am always concerned about unknown unknowns, right? And that's why, to me, having that human element on the back end of the I'm glad they did the box, and it certainly, you know reassures me that the lab value of the caliber device is very accurate. But the human element matters because the human body's weird. and and there's always the weird thing, right? That oh, we didn't think to account for that. So that to me, the fact that it performed well in both, and I say well again because I'm continuing your theme of humbleness, um, phenomenally well in both aspects of that trial, to me was very reassuring on the accuracy of the device.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I just give you an example of why the human testing could be very different is obviously when humans exhale, the air has a lot of humidity in it.
Yep.
The air comes out at a elevated temperature, about 32 plus degrees centigrade, uh, close to body temperature, but not quite. And it's almost entirely saturated with humidity. It's almost like 100% relative humidity, close, not exactly. So the mechanical simulator doesn't do that. It produces essentially room air in terms
Yep.
of humidity levels. So you don't necessarily know how the humidity is going to affect the instruments. So let's make sure that something weird doesn't happen, when there's humidity, for example. Now, it turns out the humidity actually matters quite a bit because the amount of humidity in exhaled air, just in terms of the number of molecules, if you will,
Hmm.
is actually pretty close to the amount of CO2. So
Oh, interesting.
yeah, so it's a substantial number of molecules in exhaled air are not oxygen, not nitrogen, and not CO2. There's something new called water. And that water takes up some of the volume of the exhaled air, which recalibrates how much oxygen. Because if the oxygen percent is this and the CO2 is that, well, that's because some of the exhaled air is water. So, and it's just one example of something that could be different between the
Absolutely.
machine and a human, which is why it's like you said, it's a very good idea to do both. And these are smart guys; they're very smart, and they did both, and they put it all together into one picture.
Absolutely, and I think that's the thing that kind of creates that reassurance of accuracy. And they did mention, by the way, and that because it made me think, right? You just mentioned temperature, right? And if your device is measuring pressure, well, then the temperature of the air starts to matter because if you're getting flow, volume out of a pressure sensor, then temperature is the other part of that equation, right?
And we
So I assume
lost we
there's a
lost
temperature.
many nights of sleep worrying about that question. We were asking ourselves, how does humidity and especially temperature, how do they affect, our readings? And I will say this, every device has to deal with that. But because of the
Yep.
unique way in terms of how we measure airflow and how we measure oxygen and CO2, it would be different in our case than it would be in other
Yep.
devices that
Yep.
are out there, which is why it was especially important to test it. And yeah, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter quite a bit. But the results were important to us because this was the first time, when we came out with this product, everybody, a lot of people thought it was cool and it'd be really nice if this thing will work
Sure.
well. How do we know that it works? We want to see
Yes.
an independent external study expert
That's
that could really test it and say what's called a validation study.
yep.
So this was the first validation study that our devices had. So it was very significant in that regard that this is the first time we have an external validation.
Yep. And I mean, again, so they mentioned you're using an AI of some kind to compensate for some of these temperature, humidity factors, or
Uh,
I
they
think the
they
paper
they may have
mentioned
said
that in the
that
paper.
in the paper, but
Yeah.
I want to correct the record.
Yep.
We are working on that as a
Oh,
future
okay.
improvement in our accuracy. I wouldn't
Okay.
say that they specifically we use the term machine learning, which is related to AI, but
Yeah, sure. A
the
better
idea is that
clarification.
our 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 software in architecture is designed to allow for a lot of potential sophistication in terms of, okay, you get raw set and readings from sensors. You want to turn that into something interesting like VO2 max or sugar burn or whatever the case may be. We have all the plumbing there to really do a lot of fun stuff. And the only thing we need to do now is to add additional software to it. No changes to the physical device. And especially to collect a lot of data because eventually power comes from having a lot of data, as you were saying earlier.
Yep.
And once we start collecting data from hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of users, there's no telling how much we can do with that, including, of course, we'll
Yep.
learn a lot about human wellness and whatnot, also to improve the device itself by bringing some of that data back into
Back into
improving the algorithms that convert raw sensor data into biometric.
Yep. So let's get into the software. So that this is the only place where I have grumbles. But hopefully, and it's interesting to talk about what metrics I would want to see, what metrics are interesting, and what metrics and even format, right? Um, so we had mentioned in an earlier call, I think I was struggling to get the CO2 fat reading to correlate with the RER. Um, so that's one thing, but separately also, even in the dashboard, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what the app looks like. I'll put some screenshots up of that as well. But there's during a workout, let's say I'm recording a workout. There's the dashboard, and then there's the recording session, right? Or pages, views, if you want to call
Yeah.
it that.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't even realize that the dashboard was an option until you told me. So that was a bit hidden in some sense. Then when I look at the dashboard, surprisingly, I think that the RER is not there. And that was something that was surprising to me, is that like on the dashboard, the moment to moment or average, I think we said it's 1 minute average, or it's a few breaths, less than a minute.
I
What's
think,
the
well, generally it's not a simple answer. Some things we average over
okay?
5 breaths. Some things we average over
Okay,
30
great.
seconds, which is not that different. But, sometimes
No,
it's
sure.
the number of breaths, sometimes it's the number of seconds that we are averaging,
Fair enough.
depending on the quantity in question.
That's fair enough. Yeah. So yeah, let's say a 5 breath average RER would be a phenomenal thing, because, and part of how I'm trying to use this is I'm trying to do zone 2 training. So I want to have an RER during my workout that's less than 0.85, right?
Right.
During the workout. But not just necessarily averaged, but actually moment to moment, or moment to moment. Uh, uh, I want to decrease the intensity if my RER starts going too high, to stay under that metric, right?
Right. Right.
So that would be one great metric, and then the other one is graphing. Is on there are some graphs you can look at, but just as a again, I feel like, no, from love, I'm
And
critiquing
we appreciate
the
that.
app here.
We want
Yeah,
all
yeah,
this back, and we know that there's a lot to do on the software side. So
yeah,
no,
totally.
you know, we actually are now looking forward to receiving this kind of feedback. So we have to guess, what are people going to want? Well, we don't know. Well, let's put this
And
up there and see what
totally.
people like.
And by the way, I mean, even from a business standpoint, because I was thinking about this, like I wouldn't have done anything different than you guys did. I mean, like you had to get the hardware set first. You got to get that out there. You got to produce it. You got to send it out, and then software's iterative, right? Just as
Right.
you guys are, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And we're now actually busily working on some significant software expansion. I wouldn't call them revisions per se, but we're trying to get versions of the software that could serve different constituencies. So
yeah, perfect.
it's all something we know we have to do. And I don't think we're going to get it right the second time either, but we'll get it
No, of
better,
course not.
and we'll
Yeah,
keep getting better over time as we understand more how people really want to use this, and what helps them,
totally.
what makes sense, what's completely waste of space, and get better as we learn more about these things.
Because there's so many, and that's the other thing is, we haven't even touched on some of the other applications of this device. So one, for just to give people an idea of how wide ranging the options are here. you know, there is some percentage of the population that chronically hyperventilates. And that is associated with slight decrease in cognitive function, slight increases in anxiety, right? And merely training them to tolerate a slightly higher CO2, partial pressure of CO2 in their bloodstream, which is part of the recommended protocol for helping them with their anxiety and mental function and so on and so forth. Like that's an existing paradigm. But how do you measure how much CO2 is in their bloodstream? Well, you can actually say, well, the percent of exhaled air that is CO2 at rest will go up if you hypoventilate. If you ventilate less, you breathe
Yeah.
less than is comfortable, and allow yourself to experience some air hunger, you will be breathing a higher percentage of CO2. And that is reflective of what's in your bloodstream. And you can start to have these treatment protocols. So that's a totally different, that's not even metabolic. That's a
Right.
whole different. Oh, and it's metabolic, but it's just a completely different application, right?
Yeah, so we had
Um,
an idea, for example, of one thing that and we had it in some early versions of software, a hyperventilation indicator. Basically, you're looking at the CO2 concentration
yeah,
and a few other things and say, well, you know what, based on your exhaled CO2, you're probably hyperventilating. So a person should not breathe more than necessary to get the CO2 that you want to get out of your body. And people think CO2 is bad, want to get all out of the body. No, it's not true.
no,
And this is again, you said that, and it's worth repeating. Your body needs CO2. It only needs to get rid of the excess that's produced by generating energy, so to maintain the right level. And if you breathe more than necessary for psychological reasons or just by habit, you're depleting your body of CO2, which is not good. In fact,
hmm
you can breathe yourself into the point of fainting, just by, if
hmm
you breathe too much. And the reason you're going to faint is primarily because your CO2 level in your blood goes down and it messes up everything in your metabolism. Because CO2 is acidic, the
yep,
acidity of your blood goes down, which means it's more alkaline and it messes up with your brain. And it's quite a thing. And
yep.
it's actually nice to experience it sometimes just to see what it's like, but you'll do it in a very safe place, where you're sitting in a comfortable sofa. Either hyperventilate yourself to the point where you're getting dizzy, or do the opposite. Hold your breath until you get dizzy. And
Yep,
it's really interesting to see how these things influence your body. But it all comes back to,
absolutely.
it's all measurable in your breath.
Yep.
I don't need to count how many breaths you've taken to tell you to try prevent. I just need to look at one and say, oh, there's a lot of CO2 there. You're breathing too
Yeah,
much.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that's a super interesting metric and a completely different application for this. And in the software, it's like, well, where do you put all this, right? Because if I'm doing if I have a patient come in and I'm doing a VO2 max test, well, primarily at that moment, what I'm focusing on is I would love to see a graph of breathing frequency, a graph of of minute ventilation, right? A graph of VO2, VCO2, and then some calculations like, okay, where the carb burn graph and the fat burn graph, where's that crossover point? Overlaying those two things. I would love to see um, minute ventilation per VCO2, which is a cardiac metric that's
Right.
used for right. I would love to see, VO2 per heartbeat, VO2 per breath. That graph, being able to kind of like put those things up on and say, okay, hey, yeah, at this point, you're starting to get inefficient. You need to do workouts in this, and again, being able to zone people. I think that's the big thing. Is I've gotten a lot of personal benefit of using metabolic zones for like zone 1, zone 2, zone 3
Right.
of
Right.
exercise intensity, rather than the 220 minus your age divide by some percentage, which is some vague sort of zone that has nothing to do with your particular physiology, right?
Right.
Um,
Exactly. But you need metrics that you can measure reliably in order to open up the scope of possibilities. The thing that we've
yep.
struggled with is that, okay, so there's only so many things you would need to measure your breath, which is flow of air and
Hmm.
oxygen concentration, CO2 concentration, and throw in temperature and humidity. That's it. It's really those five things.
Hmm.
But from them, there is so many different quantities you can extract, and they all have their own significance depending on the person and the situation that you're trying to provide data for. Um, if you just look at the breath count, okay, how many breaths you take per minute, that's actually a very interesting quantity. And it's a,
Hmm.
and if you just put the caliber on, it will immediately tell you what your breath count is. And it'll count every breath. It never misses a breath. And
Yep.
every time you take a little, you sneak a little breath in, it gets you. So there was another breath, and it won't miss one,
Yeah.
right? So it's just kind of cool to look at the breath counter, and every time you breathe, oh, there it goes.
Yeah.
But what's interesting really is to look at what is your breath rate, which is how many breaths you take per minute.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of schools of thought that you want to breathe less breaths per minute. Typically a human will breathe, I don't know, 12 to 15 breaths per minute. That's considered
Hmm.
normal for
Normal. Yeah.
adults. Some people breathe more than that. That's usually that's chronic hyperventilation. Somebody's breathing 18, 20 times a minute. There's a problem, you know.
Yep.
But really, what some people say you want to do is breathe less than 10 times a minute. Just get down to 5 breaths a minute. Wouldn't that be cool?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is a tool that can help you keep track of that. You know, you can sit
Mm-hmm.
at your computer, work for 2 hours on emails and projects, and then, okay, those 2 hours, what was my average breaths per minute during this period of
Yep.
time? And what can you do to train yourself to bring it down from 15 to 12 to 10, maybe to 8? Those are
Mm-hmm.
very significant improvements in your well-being, potentially,
Mm-hmm.
if you can implement them and use a tool that can help you with that. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I think,
that's before you get the question, well, how much air is in each breath? Is it a 1 liter breath, a half-liter breath, a 3 liter breath, you know, and never mind oxygen, CO2 and all those things. So there's layers
yep.
of complexity. And when we tried in the early days to provide a be all end all kind of app, you know, on your phone that would give you all that data, we immediately ran into this issue. Well, you can't see the forest for the trees. There's just too much stuff here. And most of the stuff is not relevant to most people. And I think we are still not there. I don't think we've cracked the nut here and just, okay, what is the right data exactly that should be on the screen and beyond which more is less? And we're still working on that, to be honest.
When I review a protocol, like, I put people through a VO2 max protocol to try to get their just a standard sort of like ramp acceleration test. I find myself, I guess, looking at basically one, two, it's basically three views, four maybe if I'm worried about. So the first view is carbs and fats, right? Is through the whole test. What does the carbon fat burn do? The second view is breathing frequency and tidal volume. Um, the to see about the coordination, because like you said, the ideal strategy of, top athletes, they will increase the depth of breathing before they increase the frequency, right? And that provides trunk stabilization. It provides better mechanical efficiency for movement and so on. There are a number of advantages for that strategy.
Right.
Um, so coordination is something I look at. And then I look at the combination of VO2 per heart rate, VO2 per breath. Um, and that set of information pretty much, and then the VO2 max itself, of course, that peak was
Yeah.
or VO2 peak, I guess, technically, if depending on claiming max maybe is a bit tricky, but
Yeah.
VO2 peak for the session. And then if I'm worried about heart failure or sort of specific, then VE over VCO2, so minute ventilation per
Right.
CO2, that graph.
Right.
That's all the views that I typically would look at for this ramp test. Right now, if we're talking about meditation and breathing, all that's percent CO2 maybe, and those are all different things.
Interesting. You did not mention calories, you know, which, and that to me
I should have.
is
I should
actually,
have. I
well,
should
maybe
have,
not.
I suppose, but
I didn't mean that as a criticism. I actually
yeah.
find that we assumed when we got started, but they were just kind of exploring the idea, assumed that the number one, the killer app here, if you will, is
Mm-hmm.
tell you what your calorie burn is, because
Mm.
it's a quantity that's interesting to many, many people. Like most people really at some level care about what their calorie burn is. They don't know what it is. We spend a lot of time worrying about our calorie intake, what we eat, how many calories in this food and that food, and how we can do better in various ways. But we know so little about our calorie burn. Even if we go on a workout, you go for a run and you burn several hundred calories running. Okay, but the rest of the calories that you burn, which is a lot more than that, you have no idea. I mean, you burn them throughout the day and you need to,
Yep.
but you have no insight into how that works out.
Totally.
And
Sorry, and
we
in
assume that that's going to be a key thing, but we found is when we speak to athletes specifically, athletes are less concerned about that. They're more interested in the VO2 max and
yep.
some of these more pulmonary performance issues rather than just I want to be
100%.
burning calories because I want to maintain weight or lose weight.
I should say, so I was thinking specifically of what I go through with a VO2 ramp test. I usually precede that with an RMR test, which is then I'm concerned about what the
Right.
basal calorie burn rate is.
Right.
During the ramp test, I do look at the fat max, the total fat burn, but I don't typically look at at calorie burn during the ramp test, right? And part of that is the calorie burn there is not interventional, meaning when I give an exercise prescription, it's based on the other data that I mentioned and say
Right.
you need to the weakness in your cardiometabolic system is at this zone. It's you're not very good at burning fat. We need to build that up by doing a bunch of steady state cardio at less than RER of 0.85, right?
Right.
Or no, that's actually pretty good. What we need to do is ultra high intensity. You need to be doing hit workouts to get your maximum up to speed or whatever the deal is, right? So because I'm interested in the prescriptive aspect, um, I tend to favor that. I think in my interpretation.
What if, for example, you measure your RER, your RMR, which is your resting metabolic rate, how many calories you burn an hour or a minute. Great. You got the number. And that's what at rest. Okay. Sitting on a chair or even like that.
Yeah,
Now
totally.
let's say you notch down the thermostat in your house. Like you're
Yeah.
in Texas, but I'm in Boston, which is cold.
Yeah.
So, so what does that do to my RMR if I notch down the
Perfect.
temperature in the house?
Yep.
It's an interesting
Absolutely.
question, right?
Well, and we
And
have data that it does increase your calorie burn, right? That I think they've done a number of studies on
it,
ambient temperature and caloric expenditure.
yeah, right. But I think for a person to be able to see that on themselves and to
Totally.
kind of say, well, I'm not that comfortable. I'm colder, but yeah, but I'm burning another 100 calories a day this way. Okay, maybe it's worth it. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For
it's
sure.
I don't know if that's going to be a popular way to use this kind of tool, but we're at the point where we're just trying to imagine all the different ways people might want to use this device and what they could do with this. And I think the best thing ultimately is just to release it out there into the wild and let people play with it and see what
Yep.
what what works and what's interesting and what they like to do.
Okay, so then let me press you on this. What about data export? That's an idea. If you can export to a spreadsheet and then you can just really play with the data. However, I mean that's a power user kind of thing, but
We have it. That A4 works. I use it all the time. We've not released it as a standard part of the product yet. And
okay.
and the reason, not because we don't want people to have their data, it's because it's kind of clunky, and we
Yeah.
don't want to put a clunky tool out there. Uh, but the plumbing is there. We just need to work on and that's coming, a user interface that's a little bit more user friendly that allows people to get the data export. So absolutely, and it's coming, and people who have the device now will have it with the new some software upgrade that will come with that. So not to worry. Your
Okay.
point's well taken.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, no, phenomenal. Okay, great. The other tidbit, I did run into this, and I don't know how much you guys ran into this in your testing, but one of those real world kind of things is when I'm working out, especially when I'm lifting, I'm usually doing other things on my phone, and during a couple of the sessions, it lost connection with the caliber as I was switching to texting or switching to watching a podcast or whatever.
Yep.
And so I don't know if there's a different Bluetooth or different protocol for sleep, or I don't know why it lost contact, but I had to turn the caliber back on and reconnect.
So what you're describing is what I would refer to as imperfections in our software. Okay,
Sure.
not design flaws. Because I'll tell you what the design is. The design is that your phone, if it's around, great, it stays in contact, and the data goes to your phone in real time. Okay, so
Yep.
basically, every breath you take, the data is already on the phone by the time you finish breathing. It's there, so it doesn't download later. But it has, and you can get out of the app and go to another app. It should not undermine that. If it doesn't always do that, that's because our software is not mature enough,
Sure.
potentially, but it's supposed to do that. So
Okay.
I don't want to promise that it never does that. Do have occasionally bugs that we need to fix.
Sure.
But the other thing, which I think is a little bit more radical, and is also in the design and may eventually work well. Because a lot of people say, look, I don't want to go on a run with my
Yeah,
phone. And,
yeah,
so I don't
totally.
want to carry, some people carry their phone, but some don't, So we actually have inside the module here, there's memory storage. And
Yep.
when it loses contact, if you're in the middle of a session, you start a recording session, you start running, and it doesn't know you're running. What it knows is that the Bluetooth signal no longer finds the phone. So what does it do?
Right.
It stores the data in memory. And the next time you're connected, it's supposed to load the data onto your phone.
Okay.
So
Okay.
in terms of a intention and a design, that is how it's supposed to work. I think we've
So I
had
think,
some issues
yeah,
with
in my,
that, to be honest. So I'm not sure.
sure.
I don't want to be here, in public saying it works like a charm every time. Don't worry about it. There may be some
Yeah, yeah,
issues with that, but it's going to work eventually, and we will
totally.
have it so that then you don't have to have your phone with you
Yep.
on the run, but you have to have it to get started. To start the session, the only interface you
Sure.
have is this, but then
Of
you can
course.
just
Of
leave
course.
it wherever you want to leave it, in your gym bag
And
or
it'll
at home,
disconnect and it just kind of,
and go
yeah.
for a run. And when you come back, everything is stored here. Don't worry about
Okay, so I think that partly worked because I think when it lost contact for whatever reason, when I reconnected, it I saw the breath count go up, but it didn't download the VO2 or VCO2 data. So it sent the breath count. I don't know what else it sent, but it didn't. There was a flat line for the calorie VO2 data. So
It's
you know,
possible that it hadn't yet downloaded it, and eventually it will, but maybe not. So again, I'm
oh,
careful about
interesting. Okay, fair enough.
saying that's because there have been issues with the software, and we just keep we discover them and we fix them and we
Yeah,
keep
perfect.
going, and it's not a very mature software, so you have to allow for the fact that these things happen. But we're very good at
No,
responding
totally.
to people, and when they tell us this, we immediately connect with the development team, and they immediately go after it and hopefully fix it. So
Yeah,
I
awesome.
guess to the extent that I'm speaking to the users now. I said,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm not promising you
Well,
they're on problems,
yeah.
but I promise you we'll do our best to fix them when you tell us about
And that's the all that can again, like I said, from love because I'm super pumped about the device, right? And so and I briefly mentioned this on our previous discussion, right? Is reason I'm pumped about it. It's the right thing to measure. And measuring the right thing is always the first step to making any kind of progress, right? Is I mentioned, hey, cholesterol. Okay, if you don't have anything else to measure, maybe you measure it. But that's really the only reason we measure it is because we can. Like this is the right thing to measure, and so
it.
I'm super excited. These software kinds of things, like I'm telling you about it because it's whatever. It's interesting and whatever. Um,
Well, bad
but
software will kill a product. Yeah, I make no mistake about it. You can have a fantastic piece of hardware if the software doesn't do what it's supposed to do. You're cooked.
yeah, that's where the user hits it, right? But right now, hopefully, it's mostly power users. It's mostly people who already kind of are excited about this. I can see how it might be a problem for somebody who was a little on the fence about the value, right? And didn't really understand the how cool and revolutionary this product is. Maybe then, yeah, the software would be more of a hassle. So,
Yeah,
um,
and I think
but
for us as a company, and I say this is sort of in self reflection, we've not been particularly good about, okay, these are customers and these are not, and we're only going to do what these people want. We tried a little bit. We were we were tempted a little bit to be a lot of things for a lot of people, I think, in terms of
mm,
our early design choices. And that may still be, a bit of an impediment to how well the device serves the people that do want to use it, because some of the design considerations were motivated by different potential users or use cases.
yeah, of course.
And I think we need to get better at either just defining this is just for this type of use, or we have different applications, different software applications, not
Hmm.
Calibre, but Calibre for runners, Calibre for doctors, Calibre for, pulmonologists,
Yeah,
Calibre for
yeah, yeah,
people
yeah.
for sleep apnea, whatever the case may be,
Sure.
start having that kind of, slice it a little bit thinner and do it right for that group or for that application. So that's something that we may need to do better going forward, um, because we have really been consumed now so far, mostly, but just having the
Of course.
physical device that does it well, that measures correctly, and
Yeah.
to keep it small and light and cheap and all those things that we clearly want.
I was gonna say, it's certainly victim of your own success, right? In that you've been very successful in producing fairly revolutionary hardware, and then the question is, well, what do we do with it now? Like,
Right.
how do we, how do we, because it measures the right things that have so many applications that it can be hard to, I imagine, figure out. Well, okay, what now? Like, right, and that's why I said, okay, for me, I would love data export. I'll put it into a spreadsheet, and I'll start writing my own scripts to give me the graphs that I want, right? Because I'm a nutcase, right? So that's a different story. But most people are not going to want to interact with the data that way, right?
Well, we love the nutcases, by the way.
Yeah,
Just for the record, we want that. We're a very small company, by the way. Maybe not everybody
yeah.
understands that, but it's, at the moment, there's four of us. That's it. That's the whole company.
Wow.
Now, we do have some subcontractors, that help us with the engineering and the software development.
Sure.
We're a very small company, and we're now basically trying to make to catch up on all these things that we haven't yet done. The product's already
Totally.
out there. People are seeing it and they say, well, can it do this? Why can't it do that? And we're in a scramble right now to
Great.
make it more
I mean, not
palatable.
great for you, but great for us. It's great for all of us as customers. I can imagine it's not necessarily the greatest experience for you in that regard.
Yeah, life is
It's
intense, but
yeah,
it's very gratifying to speak with people who understand why this is interesting and want the data. That's the most gratifying thing for us, because
sure.
a lot of people say, well, okay, great. It measures all that. Why do I care? Uh, that's a different conversation for, I love it. Can we do this? Can you do that? Can you do that? Just,
Yeah, yeah.
wow.
I can imagine that. Yeah, no, I mean, certainly for me, I would love to see a world and this would be a part of that in the next 5 years, where people are not saying, "Oh, my cholesterol is this and my cholesterol is that," but my VO2 max is this and my VO2 max is that, right? If we
Well,
can start,
don't hold your breath no pun here on that, because cholesterol, you just go and the phlebotomist takes in a little bit of blood and then you get your result. Here, you actually have to get on a
sure,
treadmill and break a serious sweat, actually, to do
sure.
VO2 max. Not everybody's up for that.
Not everybody is. I got my parents to do it. So once I get my parents, I feel like I can convince anyone. Uh, but that's maybe just wishful thinking. But
But I'll say this, and this is relatively new for us, but we're talking to a bunch of folks, mostly pulmonologists, who have this thing called the 6 minute test. And
yep,
it's not a high effort test. It's not like you're not necessarily breaking the sweat, but for 6 minutes, you're walking at some pace, which could be pretty slow for people who are less in good shape, or it could be a little bit faster. But you can learn a lot just by walking for 6 minutes and measure breath at the same.
mm,
And it's a much lower hurdle for many people than to get on a full blown VO2 max test, which is
sure,
half an hour or so and sweat and breathe hard and be very uncomfortable during the test
yes,
from an
yes,
effort standpoint.
yes. Well, I guess so. So maybe I shouldn't have emphasized VO2 max so specifically, but data that is more reflective of real world important information
Yeah.
than what we're usually working with, and this would be a huge switch to bring back. And I think the unfamiliarity that I have from my patients is they just never have seen the idea of measuring breath. It's not in their mental model of health, and so re-entering that into their framework of, oh yes, breathing, it provides a ton of information on health. It would
Well, I think still many people, most people take breath for granted as just something that you learn to do the second you're born. Basically, literally, you're born, you start breathing, and that's it. You don't have to learn to breathe better or to try to breathe better. And there is growing awareness of that, and I hope that our tool just plays a part in helping people just become more aware that there's an opportunity to improve your well
sure,
being by being thoughtful about how you breathe. And there's also tools that'll let you track it and compare and chart it over the course of the months and see how your progress you're making. It could make it also fun. But this
Fantastic.
idea of thinking about breath and not as something that you necessarily do well. I have a friend that, he knows what I'm doing. He said, why would I need that? I've been breathing well now for my whole life. So I said, well, have you?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Um, so I get, and then so the next question. This was an early conversation I had with your team. Is the notion of a pro version, right? For doctors, for whatever. Still in the works. Still considering. What's the thought there? Mostly
It,
because my Pinot is broken and they want me to service it. So I'm just
uh,
throwing it out there.
it is definitely in the works. And, we're talking about a first version of it, which will not be the be all end all version, but a version of it will be available in a few short months.
Oh
So
wow.
not in the distant future. We don't have a release date yet, but something that, and the basic thing we want to do, uh, without getting into the screenshots and all that, is allow a doctor or a coach to be able to see the data that's produced by a client or a patient, whether he's 10 feet away from you or, a few miles away or on the other side of the world, doesn't matter. But you, the doctor, can be looking at your screen, computer,
Yep.
they're training or just sitting at home and breathing, and you can see what in real time.
Totally.
Now, what charts you want to see, and what screens you would want to see, that may take, iterations and feedback to get it really right. And there may be different answers for pulmonologists and for a uh, sports science expert, or for a coach or whatever. So those things will evolve slowly, but the basic capability of having one person with permission see data from another person on your computer screen is something that we will release soon. I don't have a date
Fantastic.
yet, but it's a few months.
That's fantastic, and I mean, it certainly opens up this interesting. So I'm just sort of like reflecting a little bit. But my product, my membership, it's a expensive membership. It's $11,000 right now. It's going up to $15,000 per year. And part of the reason is that I pay for a lot of stuff so I give people an intake packet, which includes a blood pressure cuff, and it includes X, Y, and Z. And so at some point, do I just start including this as a part of my intake packet for patients and say, look, here's your caliber, right? And we're going to be able to figure out what's going on with your metabolic health. We can, if you don't have to come to the office to do a VO2. I can see it. I'll give you the protocol. I'll tell you what to
Yeah.
do. 6-minute walk, whatever the deal is, and they can do that when they find it convenient at their local gym, at their whatever, and we can start to coordinate on this data. It's an interesting possibility. So
This is you're thinking about exactly the way we're thinking about it. This is exactly the kind of thing you could do here, which is you as the doctor or as a coach, give it to, your patient so that they can use it at home, but you can see the data and give them feedback after the fact or even real time based on that data. And then it becomes also part of a packet. If you have like what you described now, I've heard this kind of a concept, thrown around as something that could be integrated into a package that now has all these other different things. We love it. We love it. And we want to do whatever it needs, both in terms of a software development and support and anything else, so that this can be a good model. And the
yeah,
fact that that's easy to do and that it's inexpensive and designed to be simple to use, right? Because it's wholly with design as a product for a consumer who doesn't know the first thing about calibrating gas concentrations and all that stuff. So,
yeah,
as you know, most of these breath measurement devices, you go through calibration procedures.
yep.
You have to
I
be
have a
basically
tank in my
have the
office
lab
to yep.
technician do it. Yeah.
Yep, very much so, very much
So
so. Let's speak about calibration for a second here. The requirement, I think, is you haven't breathed into it in for 30 minutes right before
yes,
calibrating.
that's the recommendation. Yes.
So what constitutes, if I just say, oh, okay, oh shoot, I forgot to calibrate, is that enough to throw it off, or what's the
Yes.
like I need to be
It will throw it off. Yes. And the reason it
okay?
throws it off is because again, not to get too fancy, but
Hmm.
if you open it, which anybody can open it by this, it's not hard to do. I don't recommend just opening it for the hell of it, but you can open it, you can see what's inside it.
Hmm.
So once a single exhalation has entered the chambers, there's a bunch of chambers, and I'm not going to go into
Hmm.
detail of what they do, but once your exhale breath has entered these chambers, they're no longer sensing pure environmental air. They're measuring air, which is now some mix of exhaled air with room air.
Yep.
We don't know what the mix is. It's some mix.
Of course. Sure.
So if you calibrate now, it's going to take that and falsely
As
assume that this is the room air, and it'll throw
yes.
it off until the next calibration. So one
Okay.
breath is enough to throw you off. If you breathe it at once, you kind
Good
of
to know.
don't calibrate. I mean, you're better off not calibrating now, just run it without a calibration. So basically, you'll
Yeah.
use the last calibration as this reference.
Yep.
Better than doing a new calibration, which we know will be off because you will falsely take that air as and assume it's fresh air or room air, where it's in fact a mix of your exhaled air. So yeah, it's a feature of the product. Once you breathe into it,
Yeah.
you now have to wait.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but and the other thing,
If you're an expert, we can teach you how to accelerate those 30 minutes and bring it down to a few minutes. There's tricks we can teach you how to do that. But if you're just a
sure.
low power user, just leave it alone for half an hour, come back.
Well, now I'm curious what the tricks are. What's is it just a matter of opening the chamber, waving it around a little bit?
Pretty much. Yeah,
That's
pretty
pretty
much.
much, yeah.
This is not rocket science. Just once you understand why it needs to be done, it's pretty
Yeah,
straightforward.
yeah, totally,
We
totally.
don't want people opening it more than necessary, because every time you open and close it, there's a risk that you won't shut perfectly and there'll be leaks and stuff. So open it
Totally.
only as little as you have to, but
Makes
that's
sense.
pretty much what it is. Yes.
Now, the other thing I didn't understand, does it calibrate? There was something about it runs an automatic calibration when charging is complete, or
So we have that turned on right now,
did
so
I?
that when you
Okay.
calibrate, I'm sorry, when you charge it, it's sitting there, and it's like, why not calibrate? I mean, because it's
Yeah.
better, so do it. Now, does that mean you never have to calibrate when you're not charging? Well, it depends. I mean, if you charge it in this room that you're sitting in, and now you take it off the charger and want to run or want to exercise or whatever, you sit with it, you don't need to calibrate. But if you
Good.
take it to the gym, then I would suggest, once you're in the gym, just for good measure, calibrate it one more time, because the air in the gym might be different from the air in your house where
Yeah.
you did the last charge.
Sure.
So, but if you charge it in the gym before you exercise, technically there's no significant reason for you to run another calibration. Um,
Okay.
we always recommend you do, because we think it's just good habit. And it's
Sure.
so easy. I mean, just for users who haven't actually done that, calibration, it means you go to the screen and you say yes.
Yep.
And then when you calibrate it, there's a light here. It's a yellow light, and it goes on and it breathes a few times. This yellow light takes less than, I don't know, a few seconds, 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you're done.
Totally.
All you need to do is leave it alone. So it's
Yep.
very, very easy to do. So why not? But I also don't want to mystify this calibration. It's essentially what you're doing is you're telling the gas sensor, which is mostly oxygen, CO2, and that, okay, this is your baseline.
Yep.
And it's interesting, traditionally what people do in medical grade breath measurement devices, they bring in a special bottle of CO2 with certain concentration and a special bottle maybe of oxygen, and they
Yep.
put a squirt of that into the system and say, this CO2 is exactly 5%. So measure that 5%.
Yep.
We have this insight, which I don't think is original necessarily, but it's very important to understand, and it's very powerful, which is the only thing that matters is how much you add or subtract from the air that you breathe. So let's say the air you breathe in, typically oxygen in air is about 20 and point something percent. The point something, by the way, is just because of humidity. So dry air is 20.9% oxygen everywhere in the world. It doesn't matter where you are. Now, let's say for some reason, you're in a building where the room was 19% oxygen or 23%. Then all you need to know is how much the exhaled air is less than inhaled air, or for
Mm-hmm.
CO2, how much more. So in some sense, calibrating against the ambient air is better than
Yep.
calibrating against an absolute standard. It gives you more relevant biometric information than an exact calibration against a standard, which is not the air you're breathing. So we're taking advantage of that, and it simplifies life by orders of magnitude. I've talked to some
Totally.
purists about this, and even the purists will grant you that it's probably almost always better, but sometimes maybe not. But for the rest of
Well,
us, so much easier.
yeah, I mean, the big issue there is that yours seems to work. And again, that's based on this study, right? That does validate the methodology of what you're doing and how it works. Because Pinoe has an ambient air calibration, it just doesn't work. And even the study noted that is that hey, we did this without, and I had to buy a gas calibrator to calibrate the Pinoe because the data quality was awful with their ambient air calibration. And
Yeah.
so, yes, the concept sounds good, but implementation is everything, right? And so,
And that's where software matters. I think it's, if you lean too hard on the sensor's own capabilities, then you can get into all kinds of weird places because these sensors typically come with some built-in algorithms or built-in quirks. Uh, but if you extract, just tell the sensor, just tell me what your reading is. Don't interpret it. Don't mess with it. I'll put the software analysis on it, and I will
yep,
do that. And I can change that software like literally in real time. Just go to the source file, change this. So
sure.
that's how we do it. Okay. We basically get to the bottom. What's going on here? How's it supposed to work? Write software code that does that. And, rather than use black boxes that sometimes, so I don't know about what other manufacturers, I don't want to even name
No,
other
sure, of course.
manufacturers, but
Yeah,
I
sure,
don't know what they're doing. I know what we're doing. What we're doing
sure.
is simple, and simple allows us to avoid some pitfalls. And we've actually gone and used some black box calibration algorithms that come with some sensors and got in trouble, honestly. And it messed
Yeah,
up some of our measurements. We found out that, and it's not because they're wrong. It's just that they do stuff that you don't always understand. So we're trying to keep it simple.
makes sense.
But
Makes
most
sense.
importantly, I think for me is the user experience. I
Yeah,
value the user experience even higher than the accuracy of it. It has to be something that is easy to use because if the calibration process is as complicated as it usually is with these devices, what
hmm,
happens then is that people just don't bother calibrating because it's just too much hassle. And,
yeah,
and that's not good. And then you get really degraded accuracy.
sure.
So we decided we're just going to have it. Your calibration is just the app. There's a button. Do you want to calibrate now? You say yes. You're done. That's all you have to do. Just wait 10 seconds and there you are. We think that's about as easy as you can make it. And
100%.
yeah, yeah, it
It
does work. It does work, So I'm very happy with that, and with many features here. Not everything is perfect here, That's why we still have jobs. We still want to keep making it better.
Sure, sure. I mean, I will say, and the reason I mentioned this calibration thing is that, you know, it does, from the user experience standpoint, you have to develop the habit, right? In that my mental, the first time I was like, well, let me put it on first,
Yeah,
then turn it on, and then connect the app, right? And so you have to say, no, no, no. I have to connect the app first, let it connect, calibrate it, then putting it on is the last step, not the first step. And that's just a sort of like, hey, okay,
that,
you got to have that workflow.
that's exactly right. For what it's worth, a lot of people do exactly what you described now. So
Okay.
actually, in
Yeah.
our documents, whether the online documents or even in the little brochure that goes in, we literally say, "Don't put it on yet," because
Yeah.
people will
Yeah.
immediately, the boss put it on.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
put it
Yeah.
on. The reason we don't want you to put it on it because we want you to run the calibration before you breathe into it. Once you breathe into it, now you got to take it off, wait
Now
half
you
an
got to wait.
hour, and then start again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and some people learn it the hard way. Some people read the instructions.
What is the battery life on it actually? That's the other, I haven't really pushed the limits of how long it'll keep reading.
So this is actually a live topic of exploration right now because we know what
Okay.
we originally when we first and some people have looked at our early not literature but our website and whatnot. We said it should
Yep.
be about 13 hours. Now
Okay.
we're not getting 13 hours consistently. It's less, and we have some ideas why. And so the battery life is longer than most people want to wear this thing, and significantly so. But it's not as long as we originally thought it was, and that may not be a problem. And nobody's actually complaining that, oh, the battery ran out on me sooner than I wanted it to. But we're working now on extending the battery life. To me, there's two separate questions around battery life. Following if you run it, while it's measuring and all that. And that I think is a non-issue because it's a lot more than anybody wants, where if it's
Makes sense.
The other thing is the how many days it will last before you need to recharge it.
Yes.
Especially you charge it and then you take it off the charger and come back like a month later, it will be drained. And I can explain why, but it will be a few days. We'd like it to be more days,
Sure.
So we're talking days. It's not hours, it's days, but it's not weeks. Okay. So
Yep.
we're working on getting that longer. It has to do ultimately with when it's asleep, it's just sitting there not doing anything. So it's still draining the battery by design, because it keeps the sensors, in a warm state, and that allows you to just pick it up and run and use it right away. If you didn't do that, you wouldn't be draining the battery cracks. The sensor would have to warm up. So in order to not have people experience a warm up time on the sensor, we opted to say, okay, it'll keep it warm. Yes, it will drain the battery over the course of 3, 4, 5 days, but that's a good trade-off. And that's been the design. So
I totally would. I had not even thought about the need to keep the sensors warm, but it totally makes sense as to what
by the way, when I say
that
warm, I
means.
don't mean temperature warm. It's a electrically warm. But basically feed them a little bit of power all the time. And that keeps them in a state where they can just hit the ground running and measure accurately. Otherwise, these are complex sensors. You get in the world of gas sensors. It's a whole world, right? And 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 the CO2 is different from the oxygen. It's different from the humidity, so they all behave differently. But to keep the whole system ready to go on a moment's notice, you got to keep pumping power all the time, and that's what drains the battery in a sleep. When you can turn it off completely, we don't recommend doing this, but there's a way. You hold the button down for about 20 seconds. And at that point, it's not, battery stays the way it is. And it could stay probably for months. That's that.
Yeah.
But we don't recommend doing that. We only put it in that mode, frankly, for shipping, shipping just.
Right. So, I mean, it's an interesting notion of this user workflow kind of thing. Cause I have run into that, right? Where I do a workout, go do it, I come back and then, throw it in my bag. And then I pull it out and I was like, oh, it's dead, 3 days later, whatever the deal is.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've had to say, okay, well, my workflow is it comes out, it just gets plugged in, right? It's just that, and so.
I think that's right. This is for the current device. I will say that it's not technologically difficult to make a device with longer lifetime. I mean, the most obvious thing is just to give it more battery, bigger battery. It's way more and costs more, but it's not hard to do. So we made the choice we made, and there may be in the future versions that last longer. I don't know. Maybe we make a version for the Marines, they want one. They want it to last for 40 days. Okay, so it comes with a big battery. You can do it. This is our friend.
I mean, especially now that I understand this notion of having to keep the sensors warm, I would, I think this is the right choice. And it's just, again, about just like there's a user workflow for don't put it on your face till you've connected it and calibrated it. There's a user workflow for when you come back from the gym, plug it in, right? And actually, in that sense, the battery is, lasting 3 days is just sort of an extra luxury. Oh, I forgot to plug it in. Okay, I'll plug it in now, like the next day or whatever, right? But
the key criterion is whatever you want to do in a day, a reasonable person wants to use it in the course of the day. They don't need to charge during the day. Just like your phone, it would be a disaster if your phone, maybe it is a disaster, but the phone doesn't last from morning to night. You have to charge in the middle of the day. That's not good. You want to charge it every night,
100%.
Your bedside. That's okay. As long as it lasts the whole day. Now, this does not need to
I think
run
that's
measure breath, you know, all day long, but whatever it is you want to do with it, you want it to be able to run the course of the day without charging. And then every night you
you,
just plug it in. Of the
you
app.
say that. I believe me, at some point I will have this on my face for 12 hours. I can promise you that I'm going to try and push this for a full workday at some point.
Well,
The you know
then hopefully we'll get the battery to last that long. I don't want to promise that it can do that right now, but it's
no,
supposed to actually be
fair enough.
that good now. But something tells me that it's a little bit short.
Sure. My colleagues, my colleagues have gotten used to the fact that bizarre things happen whenever I'm around. So there probably will be a slightly raised eyebrow with me having a mask on my face all day, but
We
at
spend a
some
lot
point
of
they'll
time
just
worrying
shake it
about
off.
how people will feel about something on their face, because let's put this is not a time to rest. It's very visible, and we're very sensitive to other people's faces and to how our face looks.
Yep.
So not everybody feels comfortable walking around in public with, and by the way, we started this project before COVID. So, COVID kind of to some degree legitimized
Yeah, I was
walking
gonna.
around. Not that this is a COVID mask,
Seriously, no, exactly right.
but
But it really did. I was thinking about that because I was wearing it at the gym, right?
yeah,
And I was wondering, I was like, I wonder to what degree everybody's just gotten a little bit used to other people having stuff on their face, whereas pre-COVID that might have attracted more odd looks.
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
When COVID happened, we've already started down this path. And I was wondering whether that's going to slightly take the edge off the social acceptability of being seen in
Yeah.
public with something.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
but,
Which is great.
but different people have different views on this. And
No,
by the
sure.
way, from an aesthetic standpoint, this is my favorite topic, but we don't spend any time on it. It's not a priority, at least hasn't been, as how we get, what other looks this can have, what in terms of color and shape.
Mm.
So, okay, it's transparent, right? I don't think there's a lot of other breath measurement devices that are
I think that was
transparent.
great. Yeah.
Is it
I
good?
think
We've actually done a little survey. Oh, and guess what? It's about 50. But there's a comparable fraction of people who think it's better transparent than those who think it isn't. So
really.
I'm not going to
I
make
love the
everybody.
transparent.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm very surprised that anybody would. That's interesting. That's
yeah,
fascinating to me.
yeah. We absolutely know people who would rather not be transparent.
Huh.
And the other thing is that with colors, so we have two colors right now that we have created. One of them is this white, and the other is this kind of gray. I'll put them both around camera.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
usually we match them. I just for shit,
Sure.
like put the gray one on the white one, but they're not. It's not how it's supposed to. They're identical in function,
Sure.
but you know, every day you go, well, should we have more colors? Maybe we shouldn't have. Maybe two is too much. Because it creates all kinds of headaches and logistical complexities. Maybe we should just have one color, or maybe we should have multiple colors. Maybe we should have people customize their color. Put stripes on it.
Yeah.
We'll get to all that one day. Right now, it's just
I'm a
fun.
big believer in the old Henry Ford. You can have it in any color you want as long as it's black.
By the
It's
way, black is the color that a lot of
there's
people have asked for.
well, fair
Yeah.
enough. Makes
Um,
sense. Makes sense.
so,
Only other thing before I forget the little silicon thing that's supposed to go here, which I had
yeah.
forgotten.
Yes.
Um,
Why is it
tape.
there?
What do I do when I lose it? Because I can promise I will lose that plug.
Yes.
And then why is it there? Yeah, that's
So there's
those
three
two.
things you can do when you lose it. One of them is you can buy these things online. You can give up like 1,000 for $2. I mean, they're so cheap. You go to Amazon, and because they're used to protect phones and every other device on earth, these are not developed for this. This is just
Oh, okay. I didn't realize
it's
that.
a commodity product.
Good to know.
That you use. I said iPhone. It's a USB-C port. So basically, it's a plug, a USB-C plug or dust cover, they call it, I think. And Amazon will flood your screen with an infinite number of suppliers. Will sell you these things by the hundreds, bag of 100. So that's the easiest thing to do. You could put a tape on it. I don't love the idea, but it will accomplish the goal to some degree. The third thing you could do, which I do not recommend, is just not use anything. And the reason it's there mostly because when people work out, intensively and they sweat, or even when there's a lot of condensation or liquid water, you don't want liquid water getting into this. This is an electrical connection, right? And you don't want liquid. Not a safety issue, it's no high voltage here, but it could mess up the device. And we've seen it happen. Flood helps a lot with that. So it's really there to protect the device from liquid water, which can be an issue during intense workouts, sweating, or breathing, like I said. So that's why it's there. It does not change the measurement itself. We've found that there's no significant difference in the reading you would get with or without, but it's a precaution that we recommend. So, and we typically pack the boxes with an extra one, just because people lose that, I don't remember.
Well, it's good to know that it's not, I actually had never seen it before. So it's good to know it's a commodity product, right? And that's just simple solution. Great.
USB
When I lose it, I'll buy it.
And you can,
Perfect.
and by the way, speaking of color, you can get them in any color you want.
Okay. Perfect.
You don't make them right, but you can get them black and white and gray and red and everything you want.
And so then along those lines, the rest of it, how splash proof is it, or not?
Well, so let's this part. Okay, so this is this, right? Okay, this is the module. This is we'll call the face piece. Some people call it the mask. Don't like that word, but called face piece. Okay. This thing is completely waterproof. You can throw it in the dishwasher, in the washing machine, run it under the faucet, whatever you want, and it's fine. This, you do not want to run liquid water. You just don't. But you don't need to either. So you can wipe it clean with a moist cloth,
Yep.
If you really want to, and you think you need to, you can open it. And you can even go with a little swab, with alcohol or just blow it with air. It's not supposed to get really to the point where you need to clean it, but if you do, you can do that. But no point do you want to put it in liquid water, because liquid water will get in and mess a bunch of them. There's a lot of electronics here.
Okay.
They're sensitive, they're expensive, and you don't want to expose them to water. So the idea is by this separation is because this you do want, you're going to sweat it and breathe in it.
Totally.
You want to wash it pretty much every time you use it, or at least every few times. We want to make it super easy. So just pull this thing off. Don't worry about this guy. Put this under the tap. Just run tap water in for a few seconds. That's great. And then you can free attach. It's dry.
No, fantastic. Yeah. Sorry. The other idea I had is, okay, if I hop into a cold plunge, what happens to my caloric burn? Right. But at least if I keep my head above water.
Yeah. Keep your head above water. Exactly. People have asked me
if
you can use it when you're swimming. And the answer is no. Swimming. But unless you're swimming without water. But cold plunge, I think, would be really interesting, actually. But yeah, just as long as you keep it out of water, you're fine. It should not be a problem. And by the way, I don't know that water is going to be a serious problem, except here's the one thing you want to really be careful about, which is when you charge, with an AC cable, you're gonna plug this in. You don't want it wet when you're doing that.
Yeah,
that's when you can get in trouble. That's because now you have real high currents, that charge the battery, and we've seen these things heat up, and even start to smoke, and it always happens when there's water here. So you want to make sure there's no water in this when you charge. So for example, if you have a session and you sweated quite a bit and some water's on it, give it a rest before you plug it in. Don't plug it in right away after that. Let it dry off, and then you can start charging.
Hence the importance of the dust cover there, or the USB.
That dust cover solves, I would say, 95 or 99% of the problems, but be smart about it. If you have something that's dripping water, don't plug it in. Charge. That's never a good idea.
Well, phenomenal. I think those are, but I did want to give you, is there anything we didn't cover? Is there any new directions that we haven't had a chance to talk about? Stuff y'all are thinking about, stuff y'all are exploring?
Well, the interesting thing that we want to start doing is having data from Calibre come to you alongside data that's not from Calibre. So we get a lot of people ask us about
heart rate. Of course, that's the
obvious one. And it does not measure it. We could put heart rate monitors there, but why? I mean, because there's some really good heart rate devices anybody who buys this already has something that measures their heart rate on their wrist.
I'll tell a brief aside. I will tell you actually, not putting a heart rate monitor on it, I think was a good decision, and I'll tell you why. Is when I first put it on, I'm unfamiliar with it. I don't know. I haven't read this study. I haven't seen this, right? So the first question is it really measuring my calories? Is that really what's happening, right? And if there's a heart rate sensor, then the question is, well, is it just extrapolating from my heart rate? Or is it really measuring my caloric burn from my breath, right? And the
But we
fact that there's no heart rate monitor means that when I see it change because I get up and move around, there's no heart rate for it to be fudging on. It has to be measuring calorie burn, otherwise it wouldn't change.
So interesting. I'll give you a really good example which ties right into what you just said now.
Hmm.
We do not require you to fill in your body weight. It's such a very deep point because all these devices tell your cows, the first thing you do, tell us your body weight and probably your gender. I'm not sure they all ask for gender, but it's certainly ask for body weight. And we don't. And
Yep,
you know,
I saw that.
the reason is it's really a statement that
Yes.
it does not need to know your body weight to tell you how many calories you burn. So we say, well, what if I'm a big, 250-pound guy and I'm on the treadmill and I got, a lady who weighs 110 pounds and you're saying we're going to burn second. No, you're going to a lot more calories for the same
Yep.
rate of walking, but you'll be breathing a lot more too.
Yep.
The calorie rate of your breath is exactly the same. In fact, you don't even have to be human. A crocodile, if you had the mask fit on their face, you'd probably get the same calorie read on oxygen and CO2 as a human.
Yeah.
Because it's just basic chemistry. So it ties to your point. So we now allow people to put in their weight because one thing we want to do with the weight is not make corrections to your calorie burn, but take your VO2 and divide it by your body weight, because a lot of the VO2 literature focuses not on some absolute value, but VO2 per kilogram of body. Okay, very simple. Just divide by the number of kilograms.
Yep.
But you got to tell us how many kilograms it was.
Sure.
But I actually wanted to avoid that for the reason that you just said, which is I don't want people to think that we're using body weights to figure out calories by conventional mechanism. But it's really something much more, much different and new. And the fact that we can do that without asking your body weight, even if we're approximately right, is pretty amazing. I don't know if you're literally, somebody weighs 100 pounds or 300 pounds.
Yep.
And I will get your calorie burn really right. It's just pretty amazing if you think about it.
Absolutely. Sorry, and I interrupted you're talking about integrating with heart rate devices just to say.
But people, especially athletes, really want to know once you side by side. Okay, here's my VO2 and here's my breath rate, and what about my heart rate? Can I see that? And we don't have a heart rate monitor here, and it's possible, but not easy to do that just in terms of the location. Right, it's not touching your skin. But what we are very interested in now is coming with ties to other products, which are out there. And I won't name any, but there's many products out there that are very good at other things like heart rate and whatnot. Yep. And our data, as well as theirs, all lives on the same cloud, right? So it's not technologically very difficult to get our data to show up on their app or their data to show up on our app, as long as the user gives the right permissions. So that's something that we're very interested in bringing to the table. Again, it's one of those things that's on our near-term roadmap, features we want to have. People have asked for it.
Yep.
We can do it. We don't have it yet, but it's coming.
Phenomenal. Yeah, I think that, and even some of the metrics I mentioned, right? VO2 per heart rate. Well, you need the heart rate and so if you're going to look at that, it's an index. Yeah. But
so those are exactly. So once you have heart rate, I think there'll be a few other things there, but heart rate is the one that keeps coming every single time. That's the one people.
Sure.
I give you another example. And in the early days, we thought about putting a GPS chip here, so it can actually track your trajectory when you run. And then you can say, oh, here's the run. Here's it goes uphill. My calorie goes up. Very cool, right? We didn't do that. We didn't put a GPS chip. It would be more battery drain, more weight, more cost. We figured most people have a very good GPS already, and they can take it with them if they want to. So I'm not ruling out the possibility one day of having a GPS tracker here, but we don't think it's money well spent. one more GPS on a runner, which already
I
has it
think
in their watch and in their phone and everywhere else.
makes a ton of sense, and especially, I mean, I think you guys did an amazing job choosing a price point that makes it accessible, right? It's
Yeah.
like, okay, it's not $5, but it's $5 compared to the existing stuff. I mean, versus the 10,000, 20,000, $30,000 devices out there.
Yeah.
It's 400, not four, what is it?
Yeah. Well, the list price, was, uh, was $399, and we're actually looking to increase it. Uh, but it's more complicated question about there's going to be different apps now. Some apps will be free. Some apps will be a lot more money. And
Sure.
in the long run, we would love to be in a place where we can make the device very affordable, even more affordable than that,
Mm,
and make more revenue through different use apps. So that's something that's we're
totally.
discussing internally right now. The app, you just get it as part of the deal, and we don't charge people, but that's not the long term plan. The long term plan is there will be some payment for the app on a monthly basis, but part
Sure.
and parcel of that would be making the device actually. So it's
Very good.
probably, but that's just kind of an inside view of our internal debates right now. Today, you go out there, you can buy it for $489 on our website, and we were
Okay.
essentially up until up until now, we're still just catching up on back orders. We will be fully
Sure.
caught up before Christmas. We'll be fully caught up on back orders, and at
Oh,
that point,
congrats. That's
yeah,
that's a big metric.
it's a
Yeah,
huge one for us. We've been trying hard to do that, and we're on track. Uh, but once we are there, then then people can just go on our website, and hopefully it'll ship in a
buy
matter of
one.
days, not weeks or months.
That's
It,
phenomenal.
well,
Yeah, that's exciting.
it's too late for Santa Claus this year, but because but certainly for next year for Santa, and well before that.
Yeah, maybe for the New Year's resolution, folks. We can aim for
Exactly,
that. That's
but there's other excuses down the road to buy this for yourself or for someone you love. Uh,
totally.
we're not promoting it in the marketplace right now because we felt our first responsibility is to deliver back orders to people who bought it and paid for it and passed. They've been waiting
Of course.
patiently for a long time. But once we've done that, then we'll probably be a little bit more proactive in getting the word out
Of
there. And,
course. Of course.
we're not going to have Super Bowl ads or anything like that, but try to tell more people about this because I don't think most
Yeah.
people know that this thing exists in a way that is affordable. Have fun, actually.
It really is. I mean, I keep saying this. I'm super psyched, and I mean, yeah. Hopefully, this little podcast will help drum up some. I'm a very small audience, but you never know what gets out where.
One at a time, that's how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.